first order of business is a motion to receive and file the call letter we all received about this meeting.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
And before I go to old business, I would like to our citizens who are watching in particular, and to some of you in the room, my wife and I did go out and get tested yesterday at East Park on the campus of ACTC, and per the governor's urging and request, I think Senator Robin Webb was pretty responsible for having a site put here in Boyd County, and I would urge all of you to you register online for an appointment, and they're there all the rest of the day today and all day tomorrow. And I think you go to council, you're going to check on that for me, Kentucky.gov.
You want me to look it up?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. You can just register for a time slot convenient to you. And let me impress upon you all that are thinking about doing this that a lot of our people are not doing this. So we drove out there. It's very orderly. There are tents. You don't ever get out of your car. You crack your window enough to hand your driver's license, and they check those out, register you. They give them back all cleaned off. You go to another tent, all driving, very orderly, and they do the same thing. They're double checking who you are and so forth. And then you go on to the third tent is where they will again check your licenses through the window, and they will give you a little vial that has also, it's in a little plastic cover, very sterilized operation. You open up, you take out the swab, and a nurse gets in front of the car, and she shows you to, do your one nostril. Then she counts with her fingers about 10-15 seconds, and then she has you twist it. You put it in the other side, you twist it, then the swab breaks in two, and you take the little screw top off the vial, and you stick it down in there, and you screw it back on, and you hand them out the window to the nurse. And this is a project of the state of Kentucky, and they have contracted with Kroger, and these were all nurses, and they were out of Cincinnati area, and doing this in conjunction with the governor's hope that more and more people are tested. And as you watch the news every day, I'm sure you are, there's not a whole lot more to do, you find out that testing is the key to this. Obviously the vaccine is going to be the key for all of us returning to some degree of normalcy. But at this point, testing people to see who is positive and who's negative, which tomorrow, the next day, may not mean much. For instance, it takes 4 days to get your report back, and if you're positive, they will call and tell you what you need to do, and if it was a negative test, they will email you. So, I mean, my wife and I have never had any symptom, and we followed every rule and regulation, and it's not necessarily foolproof, I'm sure, however any of us are living right now, but we think we're probably okay. But I think it's so important for our city and our county people to be tested. We kind of stuck on the number of cases, and we're very low. But we also, as the governor points out, he doesn't point at Eastern Kentucky or Ashland, or Boyd County, but he says that there are many areas that we think people probably have it and don't know it. They may not be afflicted with it, and end up being the kind of a situation where you develop antibodies. I don't know, but this test is just simply to whether you have it or not at this time. And I would urge you to get online. Did you
I got what you need.
Okay.
You can go to kycovid19.ky.gov. So kycovid19.ky.gov, and you can get there that way, or you can go to thelittleclinic.com/drive-through testing/schedule. You can either way.
Okay. Thanks, Commissioner.
You're welcome.
So I hope that I hope you all will heed that and be tested. I think it's important for our people to know where we're at in all this. And one place we know we're at is that no one knows how long we're going to be dealing with it. I do have one good item here to report. It is a proclamation about National Police Week, which actually I have read through this, Chief. May 10th, yeah, next week, 10th to the 16th. So to recognize National Police Week 2020 and to honor the service and sacrifice of those law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty while protecting our communities and safeguarding our democracy. Whereas there are more than 900,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the Ashland Police Department, and whereas there have been 58,866 assaults against law enforcement officers in 2019, resulting in approximately 18,005 injuries. And whereas since the first recorded death in 1786, more than 24,200 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice and been killed in the line of duty, including 6 members of the Ashland Police Department. And whereas the names of these dedicated public servants are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C., and whereas 308 new names of fallen heroes are being added to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial this spring, including 146 officers killed in 2019 and 161 officers killed in previous years. And whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty will be honored during the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's 32nd Annual Candlelight Vigil on the evening of May 13, 2020. And whereas May 15th is designated as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of all fallen officers and their families, the U.S. flag should be flown at half-staff. Therefore, be it resolved that Ashland, Kentucky Board of City Commissioners formally designates May 10th to 16th, 2020 as Police Week in Ashland, Kentucky, and publicly salutes the service of law enforcement officers in our community and in communities across the nation. Chief, thank you, and you provide that to your staff, that we remain extremely proud of the Ashland Police Department. As a monumental first responder on behalf of our citizens.
Mayor, before you get into old
Yes.
business, can I tell you guys an announcement?
Yes, you can.
I just wanted to let you all know, and this is, I guess, a little bit of good news. And projects like this, I like most of all because basically some private citizens saw a need or a want and organized a plan and raised the money, and now it's going to be done. So Dave Daniel and Grace Dixon and Lindy Lohman wanted a mural somewhere, basically like a Welcome to Ashland mural painted somewhere in Ashland. They raised over $7,000 on Facebook, a Facebook donation campaign, and Graham Allen, and I'm going to get the other name wrong, I better look it up. Graham Allen and Jeff Murphy from Square Peg Studio and Design will actually be in town from May 14th to 16th to paint an Ashland mural on the side of Paul Castle's building right next to the hotel, so you can see it from the hotel. 14th to 16th, so that'll be finished.
Terrific.
It's a great project, and I'm excited that it's going to happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank to Dave and Lindy, and who was the other one?
Grace Dixon.
Grace Dixon. Thank you all. And Paul
Yeah.
Castle.
For offering up his building.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's I think a great project again that's totally citizen led, and
Great.
they raised all the money and they're going to get it done.
Great civic pride in that project. Thanks. That's terrific. Anybody else?
I just want to say today's National Day of Prayer,
It was.
and it's usually a big to-do down at the museum, but we had a virtual meeting, and so I just wanted to let you know that the city has been prayed for this morning.
Well, I saw that article, and I think I'd probably be remiss if I didn't have you offer a prayer today for us.
Okay. Father, we thank you for this day in Ashland, Kentucky, and we're thankful to live in our city. We're grateful for our city and for its people, We pray now for our staff and our city manager, our elected officials here, our mayor and commissioners, that you'll give us wisdom and judgment and discernment as we go through this meeting. We have a wonderful city. We love our city, and we ask your blessing on it today on this National Day of Prayer 2020. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Commissioner Goode. Appreciate that. Old business item A.
Second reading and final adoption of an ordinance entitled, "A Series Bond Ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky, authorizing the issuance of $10,500,000 principal amount of water and sewer system revenue bonds, Series 2028, which amount may be increased or decreased by up to $1,050,000, designating the paying agent and registrar in respect thereof, approving the preparation of a preliminary and final official statement in respect thereof, providing for the sale of such bonds to the lowest and best bidder, and authorizing the mayor and the city clerk to execute documents on behalf of the city."
So moved.
Second.
I would hope, City Manager, you make sure the local media, especially the print media, receives the different expenditures under this, so they, can report accurately.
Will do, Mayor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item B.
Second reading and final adoption of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky adopting Amendment 11 for city employees and Amendment 10 for the Fire Department Union for the City of Ashland, Kentucky Medical Care Plan and Summary Plan, adopted by Ordinance 46, 2012, and previously amended to include telehealth services."
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Consent agenda.
A resolution of the City of Ashland, Kentucky adopting, authorizing, and approving the course of action presented by the city manager on the items appearing on the consent agenda for the special called meeting of the Board of City Commissioners of May 7th, 2020.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion so we can discuss.
Second?
Second.
Sure. I may be able to help in the discussion a little bit. I'm not sure.
I am
but-
not comfortable voting on item 3 on the consent agenda.
What I would ask the commission to do is to pull out number 3, which is our addressing our health care plan increases and benefit reductions to at least our next meeting, our next regular meeting next Thursday. We do have an insurance consultant coming in to work with our finance department to review the hard work that they've put in for over a month now, I know, to look at any and other potential avenue to save money, not only for the total operation of the city, but also in regard to our employees.
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate that. And that's one of the things that, that I know Commissioner Perkins has asked for, and we've asked for
Yeah.
sort of a comparison, and we got those comparables this morning.
And we want those public at our next meeting
Yep.
too.
Yeah, I'm just not
Comparing us to other
comfortable voting on it.
cities and
So-
what they're doing.
In terms of a motion to remove item 3 and
Procedure-wise.
table it and refer it to the next meeting of May 14th, 2020 this time.
Okay.
Yep.
All in
So-
favor?
Aye. I'll make that.
Thank you, council. And then I think, as we look through, the commissioners, any commissioner has any other points, I would like the city manager maybe to expound a little bit on reductions in staff to try to help us through this COVID-19 impact, which we have discussions down here, been in 3 meetings this morning about, hoping our citizens and our employees understand what we're under right now. I know the federal government, we watch and see all the money that's being thrown around the United States, and I'm very happy that people unemployed are getting this help, at least the ones who've gotten it. It's slower. But cities are in quite a predicament, and where revenues are not coming through. Louisville and Lexington have already listed well over $100 million that they're going to lose this budget year. And while we're not in that kind of a crisis, we all have our own in cities throughout America and certainly through the state of Kentucky. Our concern's Ashland, Kentucky, and dealing what we can here. But with people unemployed, the impact on occupational tax, businesses not open, the restaurants are shut down for the most part. Many of them are having to carry out, and I'm doing my part, all I can, to help them. But we're in an unbelievable, unplanned budget crunch, and we have to survive. Cities like school system, you have to have a balanced budget. You have to end the year in a black. You have to start the year with a balanced budget. We're trying to put measures in place to finish this year with some semblance of a balanced budget. And to do that, you have very limited ways to do it. And one way it was very painful to us is to where we can is, I don't know offhand the exact percentage of personnel in the general fund. You may know that. Tony and Michelle aren't here. They'd tell me probably right off the top of their head. But in most organizations like this, it's anywhere from 80–85% of our expenditures in general fund relative to personnel. And so that tells you right there that where you can reduce some of the impact would be in personnel. So City Manager, would you just kind of apprise us of I know you've been working on this for many weeks with finance, with department heads. It is not a thing we've ever done in Ashland. Let me tell you, your baptism on this is everybody else's too. But it is not pleasant, and at this point we don't see any way out otherwise, at least with what we're looking at. So I'll let you kind of explain some of them at this point.
Thanks, Mayor. You hit a lot of really essential key points. I think at times there is confusion publicly on things that are going on and things that we have to consider. We have different categories of funds in our budget. The simplest to describe are general funds and utility funds. Think of those as buckets that you can't cross the water in. So when someone makes an observation that, well, the city can just stop doing line replacement and they can fix the budget with that, we can't do that. We could stop line replacement without having an impact on the utility fund. And per previous discussions, I won't deep dive into where we're at on the utility fund. But our challenge, as you mentioned, is right now in the general fund. We are not, the impact on the revenue of the city is predicted to be dramatic. We have coordinated with KLC, National League of Cities, KCCMA, the Kentucky City Managers and County Administrators Association. Tony and Michelle, our finance department, through their professional organizations, have been on conference calls, and there are some very dire predictions on what the impact will be. For us, as you mentioned, Mayor, primarily what we're going to see the impact on our general fund is on the payroll tax and also the net profit tax. We're also got news this week, or doing the estimations on the fact that property tax has been deferred. So that's going to have an impact on this fiscal year, where normally that's part of the revenue source that we have in this fiscal year. So the reason I'm saying all that is to make the point that putting an estimate on the impact on this, it is a moving target, absolutely a moving target. It is nothing that our city is facing anything different than any other city in the nation, and especially, I talked to my peers in Kentucky, are facing the same challenges. Mary did mention a high percentage of savings, areas that we have to look at in order for us to budget, have a balanced budget. That is a KRS requirement by state. We have to have a balanced budget. We can't deficit spend. I think that's something that also people tend to forget. And in my mind's eye, I look at this at 4 different categories: personnel, medical benefits, operational costs, and then services that we won't provide. Mayor, you and the commissioners have been crystal clear in prioritization of what we offer our city and what we provide to our city, is that our life, health, and safety do everything we can to not impact those services. Think fire, think police, think utilities. Everything else has to be on the table. And those, to a degree, if we can manage that better, if we can somehow make temporary cuts in any of those areas where there's not an impact on our citizens, everything's on the table for consideration. And that's what gets us to this very, very difficult position today. There's a list of 12 positions for your approval to conduct layoffs of. And I think I mentioned in here before, we have an authorized strength in the city of 308 personnel. So 12 off 308 doesn't sound that dramatic. But we have followed your guidance, the mayor and commissioner's guidance previously when this really started bubbling up. We didn't do any additional hires. We had some actually that were on an agenda for hire. Job had been offered to individuals we were ready to conduct, or hadn't been, we were ready to make the offer to the individuals with your approval. Let me correct that. And so those vacancies aren't being filled right now. So of 308 positions, authorized positions in the city, we're looking at a gap right now of 26 between non-hires and layoffs and retirements. And that doesn't scratch the fact that we are not doing seasonal hires, also per your guidance. So that's around 60 people, which is about 20% of our personnel in the city, which is very, very dramatic. So it's not just these 12. These 12 are these are real people that are being laid off. We've tried to assist them with unemployment, going through the unemployment process and applying for that. I know the governor and his staff talk about that daily on the daily update. We think that's all moving in the right direction. I also want to point out that when you see the costs, the fiscal notes on these, this is not their salaries. This includes salary, retirement, medical benefits, FICA, and Medicare. So that numbers on those are very large because it includes, it's all inclusive, the whole impact of laying off those positions. And Mayor, I think that's everything that I'd wanted to hit, unless you all have any questions, any specific questions.
Well, and we hope in the future to maybe, hopefully be able to call these people back as necessary, based on the economy of our city and our town. I mean,
and Mayor, that is actually written into the on the consent agenda. That as again, I just hate saying this. It sounds so repetitive, but it is a moving target. Tony, Michelle, and I were just having the discussion when there's any hope of good news somewhere, we so appreciate it of a revenue source that's coming in, or you know how people are, their ability to pay bills. But yes, like the governor says, we'll get through it. We'll get through it together. At some point, we're going to have revenues. It's difficult to predict what those are going to look like in the future. I don't think anybody can. But at some point, those revenues are going to go up as the reopening begins, and then we'll adjust and bring people back as we can to the authorized positions, and it'll just be adjusted.
thank you. Again, I'll reiterate that this is going over all over America. Smaller cities than us, our size, larger cities, the big cities. Amazing hit everyone is taking. So we're all looking for help from Frankfort and Washington. And cities, local governments need help too, you know. I mean, we're the ones that operate the services of all, public safety, utilities, and all, to the residents. I mean, you can't just reach up and find it somewhere. And in every community suffered from the very people you depend upon aren't working. I mean, I've never seen anything like it, and hope to never see it again. I just hope we see an end sometime.
Mayor, you did make me think of one other thing I wanted to hit. The funds that we've had from the federal government have been in CDBG, and you remember during the last commission meeting, you all approved a series of things that, again, Lorraine is here to discuss, but utility assistance, some PPE, personal protective equipment, some cleaning kits, things for low to moderate income families. Yeah. But Ashland, like any other city that's below 500,000, I believe that's right, Jim,
that's correct,
has not received any other federal help or state help that I'm aware of at this time. Louisville got $130 million direct from the federal government. They're able to do things with that $130 million. It'll be very interesting to see if there's anything the governor can do with the $1.7 billion that came down from the federal government, and we'll track that very carefully. The Kentucky League of Cities is working very closely on our behalf and every other city's behalf to try to express the impact of this on governments, because everybody is in the exact same boat that we are.
Mr. Gracie, just to add to your comments and to make sure I have this correct, of the 1.7 billion that the state got, only about 40 or 45% of that could go to the cities if the governor so chooses. So that would be divided across every city in the state of Kentucky, which, when you break all that out, is not even.
Well, we're gonna try to cold trail every
I agree.
dime
I
we
agree,
can come up with.
But we have to operate under the assumption that we're not gonna get a lot of help.
Yeah, and that's discretionary. He doesn't have to
Right.
distribute that. It
Exactly.
could have
Right.
gone
We
to the state,
can't-
who also
There
has
is
a budget
nothing
crisis.
on the table that says, City of Ashland, you're gonna get some
That's
help with
correct.
this.
No.
I just wanna make that clear.
What I understood yesterday is the
message.
governor may,
May.
to 40 or 45%, as Jim pointed out. I think the governor's been very clear of their budget shortfalls. I mean, and so that's going to, again, have cascading effects on us. Are we
think
going to see MAP money this year? We've already talked about the impact on paving. That's general fund. So we might just be doing emergency patches this year, not to the tune of the $1.5 million that we've done in paving every year. We spent a lot of that already this year. I think we're about halfway through our paving budget, and we had started getting fired up this spring, making progress, and then, the brakes obviously had to be put on that.
Right.
We still do have, since I'm down that rabbit hole, we still have the $500,000 discretionary funding that we got last year that can be executed. We don't have any pullbacks on this, but it's targeted for the projects that we said, Oakview Road and a couple other things that we're waiting on Columbia Gas to finish their work over there before we can get going on that. But that, I think, to your point, Commissioner, that's another example of the unknowns that we don't know at this point. What is going to be the cascading effect from the state? How are they going to make up their shortfalls?
Yeah, I think I read this morning, $434 million in state property tax that they haven't collected yet for this year that they anticipated to collect. So
Mayor,
it's a domino effect for sure.
One other thing that the public ought to understand as well is that when the actual budget for the next fiscal year comes out and goes to you all and is ultimately approved, there will be some substantial reductions in what's deemed non-essential services there. So we didn't just go straight to personnel. The planning has already been done on that, although the actual adoption of that will be during the budget process. So
Well, that was gonna be my question, this is a big ask of this board, and these affect people's lives. And, I just wanna continue to challenge all of our staff to look at every possible way we can cut without cutting our people. And, I know this board takes this decision today very seriously, and it's really hard on us. I had 100% of my own employees in my small business laid off, and it hurts me every day to think that they're not working. So, just continue to push any way you can that affects our people the least.
And that's the point I was trying to make, Commissioner, was that although this is the first to come to you in the actual planning concept, those things were the first that were thought of, and as many as could possibly do. And then when it looked like there was still a shortage and no place else to go, that's when it came back to the personnel and medical benefits. And that may not be absolutely clear since this is once brought to you first. But
Well, I'd just like to make a point about the medical benefits and the insurance discussion. That discussion was started and being had long before we were looking at a major budget shortfall. I mean, we had discussed insurance costs, and we know that we spent $1 million more last year than what we had anticipated to spend. And so this commission knew well before there was a budget crisis that needed to be addressed. So I want to make that perfectly clear, that the insurance discussion is not for and about the COVID crisis. Is that fair?
It's absolutely fair, and now with the benefit of hindsight, that was a mini crisis compared to this. I mean, that's what we defined as a crisis 3, 6, 7 months ago when we were talking about this, and we had a very different approach on it. But comparatively, it pales to what
Right.
we're dealing with now. And Commissioner, I don't think you could express what you just said any better. We're all tore up about this. I think it hurts me personally that people think that this is just a butcher knife that's going out. These are people's lives. We know that. We have some tough conversations at the staff level, and we get into areas that make all of us uncomfortable when we talk about it. We don't have a choice. I cannot emphasize enough to this community. Whoever said it, we can't count on any other help coming. We have got to solve this at our level. We will do everything we can to try to get assistance, but this is ours to solve, like every other city in the nation. And again, Commissioner, these are people's lives. These wives, husbands, sons, daughters, grandparents, we get that. And that's why I want to emphasize, Mayor, that when the revenues do come back up, I've said this to you all since I've been here. I figured it out after about 60 days here. This is a lean staff. This is not a fat staff. I don't know where we have significant depth anywhere in this city. I mean, when you lose one person, you feel it. And I forget whatever commissioner said it a minute ago. We know what the priorities are on life, health, and safety. You're going to see differences in some of our soft, and I hate to use that term, in those other areas. Think grass, think code enforcement. Code enforcement is taking a big hit with this, with a retirement and a layoff. That's a very small staff. And there are going to be challenges. We will try our best to communicate what those impacts will be as we estimate them. If you want to find the silver lining, I think of the 308 people that fill these positions, they're amazing. I mean, this is an amazing staff. They work their tail off for this city, and they're dedicated to providing the best in the city. I've said it all along. We do make mistakes. There's things we miss. There's things we don't see. That's why we appreciate the feedback. Take solace in the fact to know that you've got a very dedicated city staff that are focused on our citizens.
Thank you,
I
Manager.
think that's a silver lining.
Mayor, I have one more comment, and it's a thank you to you, Commissioner Perkins. I know that you guys talked with finance and have asked that they sort of brief each of us individually on what we're looking at in terms of a preliminary budget, because we haven't necessarily seen that yet. We don't know exactly what we're shooting toward. So I appreciate both of you for pushing for that and making sure that we have those meetings individually, so that we know exactly where we're headed.
You each will have a good knowledge base.
I appreciate that.
What's the timetable on that? When were they gonna schedule these?
Soon. Soon. Like next week, probably.
Again, the problem is it's fluid for them, and I think they're still, like all of us, trying to figure out the best way forward, and cities.
Well, I know they're not in here, but to them, I'll say, I don't think any of us are gonna say, you told us it's this number and now it's this
Right.
number. I would feel much more comfortable in, talking about, for instance, the insurance or these cuts, which, again, we all just are sick over, with a little more defined, and I know it's not gonna be set in stone, I get that, but a little more defined at what we're shooting toward.
The big picture.
Yeah,
Sure.
for a big picture. And
You will.
And I appreciate, like I said, I appreciate that guidance, and I just wanted to say that before we move forward.
Well, I count on you guys to, and you'll stand tall in it. I no doubt in my mind. Okay, all in favor? Opposed, like sign. New business item A.
First reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an agreement with the Ashland Child Development Center, the subrecipient of $5,000 from the 2019 program year Community Development Block Grant CV funds.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Item B.
First reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an agreement with Ashland Community Kitchen, the subrecipient of $21,000 from the 2019 program year Community Development Block Grant CV funds.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item C.
First reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an agreement with the Ashland Senior Center, the subrecipient of $11,000 from the 2019 program year Community Development Block Grant CV funds.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item D.
First reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an agreement with Community Assistance and Referral Service, Inc., CARES, the subrecipient of $10,000 from the 2019 program year Community Development Block Grant CV funds.
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item E,
First reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky, authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an agreement with Hillcrest Bruce Mission, the subrecipient of $22,000 from the 2019 Program Year Community Development Block Grant CV funds.
Second.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item F,
First reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky, authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an agreement with Safe Harbor of Northeast Kentucky LLC, the subrecipient of $12,000 from the 2019 Program Year Community Development Block Grant CV funds.
So moved.
Second.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
Item G,
First reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky, authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an agreement with Shelter of Hope, the subrecipient of $12,000 from the 2019 Program Year Community Development Block Grant CV funds.
So moved.
Second.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item H,
First reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky, authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an agreement with Safe Harbor of Northeast Kentucky, Inc., the subrecipient of $5,000 from the 2019 Program Year Community Development Block Grant.
Second.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item I,
Abstain.
Reading and adoption of a municipal order entitled, a municipal order of the City of Ashland, Kentucky, authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an interlocal cooperation agreement between the City of Ashland, Kentucky, and the City of Raceland, Kentucky, authorizing Ashland and Raceland police officers to exercise their powers throughout both cities in order to combat illegal activity.
So moved.
Second.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item J,
Item J, reading and adoption of a resolution entitled, a resolution of the City of Ashland, Kentucky, authorizing funds in the amount of $175,000 for the purpose of matching land and water conservation fund assistance to develop an inclusive ADA-compliant playground in Central Park.
So moved.
Second.
any discussion?
I have a question. And I don't know if this can be answered or not. Is there a mechanism in which we apply for this grant and if awarded, we can decline it if we do not have the $175,000? We just voted to lay off 12 people.
Yes,
I've
there
gotta-
is.
I've got to,
This is to apply for it.
I know, but if we apply, the stipulations of the grant are if awarded, we're committing $175,000.
It's a statement of intention, but it is not, it has to be done as an ordinance to actually authorize and legally become obligated to spend the money. This is a resolution which states the intention, if granted, to match those funds. If the circumstances at the time the grant would actually have to take place don't authorize it, you don't have to go forward with it.
Okay.
Bottom line.
Yeah, that's what we're agreeing to it. It's not a
It
good.
bothers me. I'm
well,
sorry.
well, we're not committed.
If we don't have it, we don't commit.
Exactly.
I think that's correct. I mean, this is, you're exploring the possibility. I think we've been, city manager and I have been told that it's likely that this might extend into a subsequent year. But bottom line, legally, you have not legally committed the city to spend that money. You're just exploring the grant. If the grant comes at that time, if we don't have it, we don't have it, we decline the grant.
Just concerns me, just,
Yeah, all of
You're
us.
saying you have to come back before us for review and approval.
Absolutely.
So that's where that would come from.
okay,
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
no.
You don't believe the council?
No, I absolutely do. I just have I just can't commit I
Well,
just,
Well,
I just can't do
none
it.
of us, all of us feel the same way, but
But we still have to approve it when the time comes. This is
Yeah.
preliminary
we're disproving.
things.
I
You would
get
have to enact an ordinance with 2 readings authorizing the expenditure of the funds.
Motion adjourned.
So move.
Second.